Hi.
Hi, so nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you feeling?
Uh, good. Good, I think.
Prentice Penny, showrunner of HBO's Insecure, Emmy Award winning Insecure. Thank you so much for being with us on 97 on the Beat. We are such fans of your work and of the show. And honestly, last night when I watched the season finale of the show, I felt, which I don't usually feel through most endings of series, I felt like closure. I felt good about it. It
Okay.
didn't, like it's sad that it's over, but it made me
hmm
feel complete. Like everything came around full circle. Was that the goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal was to find endings that felt, we agonize because obviously a lot of people have a lot of opinions about finales, and certainly people having opinions about finales on HBO, right? Like The Sopranos and Game of Thrones. So it was difficult. I mean, we wrote like three different versions of the finale, none that really felt right. So I don't know if it was about. I mean, we did ask, like, at the end of the day, you've been watching this show for like 5 years, so like when you walk away, like you don't want people feeling like, what did I watch this show for, right? But
Right.
you also don't want to feel like you're just doing like fan fiction of just like giving these people these all these amazing endings, because that's also like not real life, right? So for us, it was really about how do we do something that feels honest to these characters, but also feels satisfying, and like, oh, I'd be curious about like where season six would start, right? Like that was
Right.
always our thing. Like if we were doing a season six, but didn't want to end it on a cliffhanger, what would be an interesting starting point in the same way that we start the show the first season, right? What's a
Sure.
good starting point? And so that really became like kind of the guide for how we wanted to end the show.
Now, since you mentioned that, we saw that Tiffany's character had kind of a complex ending where we didn't know if she was happy or sad or, if she was going to find some sort of contentment. Can you speak to that? Was that done on purpose as well? I mean, obviously it was because that's how it ended, but
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's the goal of the all of the everybody story, right? Which is we said happiness is a choice, right? Last season. And so for us, it
mm,
was about, oh, that's a choice, right? Like, you move somewhere, it's new in the beginning, you're trying to get your lay of the land. She didn't really necessarily want to move to Denver, but I think like a lot of us, these things happen in our lives, and we like, okay, well, I'm gonna figure out like how to thrive here and do my best here. So we never
right.
really wanted to answer whether or not she was still unhappy or not this or not that. It's like that's just her life now. And she's pregnant again, which says something good, right?
Right.
It certainly feels like, okay, well, I sorted out this new lay of the land, and I'm moving on to something else. So I think in every way, there's like little moments for characters that you go like, oh, they're in like the best space they can be in, at least for, certainly characters get more screen time than others, so you're
Right.
always thinking about that. But yeah, I think we were just all trying to say everybody's in a space, I think, where they're like trying to be as secure in their insecurities as possible, which I
Ooh.
always said that was the ending. That was always our ending of the series, which was Issa the character has to be secure in her insecurities, knowing that the whole show, Issa's always like every season would be like, I'm Miss, I don't care today. I'm the boss this, or I'm gonna stop caring. I'm gonna be Miss No F's, and all these stuff.
Right.
And we were like, look, when you're really about that life, you don't have to have like a mantra. You just live it, right? And so for us, it was really about this character knowing that, like, hey, I'm always gonna these insecurities won't like ever leave me. I'll just have to like know how to deal with them in healthier ways. And that's why when
Damn.
she looks into the mirror at the end, there's no mirror Issa anymore. She doesn't need that part of her life anymore. She's like, oh, I'm gonna, because Mira Issa is always like somebody to bounce things off of, for better,
Sure.
most of the times for worse. But that was sort of a crutch in some ways. And so for us, it was like, oh, when she doesn't see another mirror in the Issa, she just sees herself. It's like, I'm enough and I'll figure it out. That was really
No.
the ending of the show.
That just touched my whole soul because I think we all have that voice, right? That we kind of bounce things off of, and
Mhm.
it can also be conflict, right? Instead
Yeah.
of just somebody that's supportive of us, we're sometimes our worst critic. So I didn't catch that. So thank you so much for sharing that because that was very powerful. Now, me and my friends, right? We're on this group chat. We're always talking about what we think the ending was going to be leading up into it, right?
Okay. What'd you
And so
think?
we assumed, we
Right.
were like, okay, this is what's gonna happen. Lauren, she's not gonna pick any of them. She's just gonna be by herself. and realize that she needs to grow on her own, which is pretty anticlimactic because we all secretly loved Lawrence anyway. But was that something that y'all spoke about in the writers' room? I'm curious to know if that's something that ever even came up as a
It
possibility.
certainly, yeah, it certainly. I'd be curious. Is that what you want your life to be in the end? Picking
Hell to
nobody.
the no.
So why would you want that for her? I mean, that's kind of the same point, right?
Yeah, but you know what's
I mean,
great?
that's
You know what's crazy? You think about it and you're like, maybe that's the right thing for her to do. And sometimes for us, like we don't make the right decisions, right? In our own lives. We're like,
right,
oh, I don't really want to end up alone, so I'm gonna do this. Or I'm
right.
gonna
But
it's
I
like
hope
you
we
kind of
all
want the character to embody that strength, but there was still strength in this decision she made. But
absolutely
you know what I mean?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think anybody. I think that's like everybody in a marriage or a marriage or relationship, I hope is picking themselves in some way. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like, I think that would
facts.
be like, if we're all picking ourselves and not, that means like, I don't think it's that binary of like, I pick myself or nobody. I mean, I think there's differences between I pick myself versus like a bad situation, right?
Mm,
Which is like, I don't think Lawrence is a bad situation. I think that
no,
situation is complex and adult, and has real adult things you have to deal with
right.
to be comfortable. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of the point. So it certainly came up as an option, but we felt very much that that would be like, what? What?
Yeah.
And so it also, it like says this mess, like, what message does that send? Like, black women can't like, I either have to like do this or not pick any, like, I don't know. It just felt like we were
Mm,
going through options. It felt, she also had picked herself the end of season 3, which is like getting her apartment together. That kind of felt
right.
like a pick myself moment, but not a pick for the end of the show. And I think, we went through different versions. Is it Nathan? Is it Daniel? Is it somebody? Is it Crenshaw? Is it somebody we don't even like? We haven't
No.
even met. Is it Lawrence? Is it somebody we haven't even met yet? Is it somebody that's like, we all talk about,
Obscure. Yeah.
or just like you just meet him at the wedding and it's just a guy that you're just like, oh, she just found some guy in between now and then. But we just felt like if
Mm-mm.
it's just some guy, then like who cares? And
We're
if
not
it's,
emotionally connected.
yeah, you're not emotionally connected to this
Right.
choice. But that was also a choice for us, right? Which is like,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, it's not about the guys, right? It's about, but it just
So
still
hard.
felt like not, it was like we said basically last season when Issa and Lawrence go on their date that they're soulmates, right? They
Hmm.
go on a date, they basically say how much they love each other. Like before the baby
Right.
up, they were basically like, let's do it. So if that's where we were ending, and this only impediment is this thing that happened over here, it's like, well, why not? Right. That's kind of
Right.
that's the point, I guess, is that, which is what we liked about the way the season 2 season ended with Issa and the fantasies of what a life with Lawrence
Hmm.
would look like, right? But we always said like maybe that baby coming through the door wasn't her baby, right? Like that, like
Oh.
the idea that and obviously in the fantasy it was her baby because it's so young, they're coming home from the
Hmm.
hospital. But I think we were getting at is she had this view of what her life could look like with Lawrence. And it's like, yeah, some of those pieces are similar to that fantasy, and some of those pieces are slightly different. But if overall I'm happy, like I was happy in that fantasy, I'm happy with Lawrence. And if the only thing is like he has a son in a moment that like we weren't together, then like, girl,
We can overcome that. Right.
yeah, we can like, yeah, like life doesn't always
Ooh.
deal you the cards you want to be dealt, right? They deal you the card, and it's how you decide to play
Mm.
them, right? If you decide to play, and so that's really what it was about for that character. Life doesn't always. It sometimes it gives you things that are tangential to what you want, not a
Sure.
literal version, and it's still like, but can you be happy? Okay, here it is. Can you be happy? And so I
When
think,
we saw her rise to the stepmama occasion, our hearts just pitter patter. That was beautiful. I mean, and
yeah,
still her being herself, with her wit and
yeah,
her comedy, it was really sweet to watch. Even when Molly and Issa had their moment of like vulnerability in the bathroom, and they both cried and kind of hugged each other. That was also, I think that kind of helped me put away the tension that they had the season prior, because I think they had some tension and then we came back and they kind of became friends again and laughed it off. And then we never saw that moment of them really like kind of breaking down with each other and telling each other that they're real friends and that they'll be there for each other no matter what. So that was really beautiful to watch. That's just me saying thank you for writing that in there because that was beautiful. Now you directed what I think is probably the best episode of this season, which was where we saw the tension between Nathan and Lawrence kind of
mhm.
percolate and then come head to head. You spoke about wanting to shoot it Western style. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, like when I read the script, even though I wrote it and obviously helped break and all this stuff, when I just kept rereading the script, which is what I usually do before I'm figuring out like what's my approach to directing it. I try to like what I kept going back to was like movies that were like westerns that this moment that this episode has, right? And like where westerns have a lot of similar tropes or themes
Mm-hmm.
or concepts, right? So like westerns, usually like a western, like a High Noon or where there's a showdown or the man that shot Liberty Valance or Stagecoach or Once Upon a Time in the West. It's all sort of centered around this town, right? And in the town, you have two typically cowboys or two sides, right, of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether if you watch Tombstone, right, you got like the Earps and then like the other guy, like the Red Scars, right? Like so there's like a tension brewing or whatever. There's usually a woman who's like a damsel in distress. There's usually like a town drunk who's sort of stumbling through.
Molly.
And then you have the townspeople, you have a location,
Right.
and you're building tension throughout the day, right? And so, or throughout the time of the thing. And so as I kept reading this, I kept going, oh, this is kind of a Western, right? We have like our two cowboys who are like, had to have this tension.
Sure.
Issa's the damsel in distress, kind of caught in the middle of this town. The town is the party. The other party goers are the townsfolk. Issa and Tori, I mean Molly and Tori are the town drunks. They're high, so they provide a lot of comedy, and then all the pieces around that, right? And so as I thought about that, you have this, and you're building to like a showdown, right? The showdown is when Nathan he sees Issa and Lawrence talking, and so
right.
once I it's like, oh, like that's an interesting idea to build an episode around from a visual standpoint. So for me, it was all right. How do we do that? How do we create tension? And a lot of westerns are looks, right? This person sees this person leave the saloon, but that person doesn't know they saw them, or this person
Mm-hmm.
sees through a window this person and that person in the barn. Are they talking about me? So like a lot of those things are looks. People don't say things. It's a lot of looks. And so I was like, okay, well, we have a lot of looks, right? Lawrence sees Issa and Nathan sees Issa and Condola sees Lawrence look at Issa. I mean, there are all these
Right.
looks, right? And so for me, it was like, great, let's just build around that. So a lot of times in my coverage, I was trying to shoot things that felt very Western and like, sometimes we shoot our close-ups more over the shoulder. So this time I was trying to shoot them slightly from like the hip, almost as if they had guns, and like how would it look from a slightly different frame, right? Or westerns are played a lot of times through like long lens, like through doorways and things like. So a lot of it was just like my visual approach to the scenes and letting them sort of build organically around ideas that westerns have. So that's really where that came from.
That was shot so well. The moment that we see Lawrence, we see Issa, and then out of nowhere, oh shit, what is
Yeah,
that?
that's a very Western thing too, right? So like, because you're kind of, I'm trying to keep the audience engaged in what's happening with Issa and Lawrence, right? And
Right.
so, but a very Western thing is to shoot like two people on the sides and shoot through them and see like the person step in the frame, right? That's a very Western thing. And so for me, I was like, ooh, let's do that. Let's like, this moment's happening, you're caught up, and then the next shot is Nathan's in the middle of, literally in the middle of it, like what are y'all talking about? Because you don't know how much he's heard,
Right.
hasn't
How
heard.
long he's been there.
It totally, yeah. So those are things that Westerns do that I was like, let's do that. Let's
Sure.
like treat these moments like that. So that's another example, like a very classic Western.
So how does Prentice, the showrunner, the producer, the writer, step into that director's hat? Like, was that a different challenge for you? You've obviously did a good job at it, but how did that feel for you? How was that different?
What's been different? I mean, I started directing season 2. So I've been directing on the show fairly early on. But obviously I have I had a great person to follow in Melina Matsoukas, who is sort of, who did our pilot and who's, done so many great episodes on the show, and watching so many other great directors, like Kevin Bray and Debbie Allen and again, Melina, and just so many others that I could just learn from and watch, and even steal stuff from, like Kerry Washington's, watched a bunch from her, just her approach to actors. I stole something from her that I did in the finale in the Issa Molly goodbye scene, when they're at her wedding. I stole something that I saw her do, and I was like, I'm gonna do that. That's a great idea. And so I did it, and it worked. It worked a couple of times in different scenes.
So what was it? Give us the juice.
What I stole from one time I watched Carrie basically have Issa talk to Yvonne like Issa the person, not necessarily Issa the character. And she was just saying like, I don't believe something. I don't believe something. Like there's more. She was just literally telling Yvonne the person, I don't believe your performance right now. Like you gotta go. And Yvonne like took it as a challenge and was awesome, right?
Oh.
So like one of the things I took from that was when we were filming the goodbye scene when Molly's thanking Issa, we were shooting, typically we shoot like the farther shots first to kind of get the lay of the geography. And then you move into close-ups. Well, the problem with like a scene like that scene is like all the characters are super emotional at the beginning. It's hard to like continually to stay in that space. So for that one, so you don't want to waste all that emotion on like shots that are far away, right? So I just reversed it. I just said, well, let's shoot all the IS East and Yvonne. What do you guys want to shoot first? And they said, let's shoot the close-up stuff first, because they were already so keyed up. It was the last scene they were going to shoot forever. So they were already like, I saved that scene for the last day that they had a scene together.
That makes sense.
So I was like, because they're already going to be keyed up, right? No, this is it. This is the last
all the emotions are going to be percolating.
Yeah, all the emotions are there. Yeah. And so they said, great, let's shoot our close-up. So I said, let me shoot Yvonne first. I feel like and Yvonne has to carry most of the dialogue in that scene. So I was like, let me just get Yvonne's close-ups because she's already has to speak so much. And then, obviously Yvonne was amazing. And then I turned around to get Issa, and I had got Issa's performances, but obviously Issa had been crying for like 2 or 3 takes already. And then I shot her coverage, which is like a couple of takes. And I just was like, it's not as quite there as when we shot Yvonne's side. Cause obviously I can hear Issa, even though she's not on camera. And I told Yvonne privately, I said, hey, on this take, when I'm shooting Issa's close-up, all the lines that you have, like screw the lines, don't even worry about the lines. Just because I was like, I know in editing, I'm gonna just put Yvonne's lines over this anyway. So I was just like, hey, in this take, just thank her as Yvonne Orji, not Molly. So anything you want to say to her about just like how she's changed your life, your family's life, I don't care how long you go, just say everything you want to say to her as Yvonne, not Molly. And so Issa doesn't know this is coming. And so Yvonne starts thanking her as Yvonne and starts thanking her for like, a bunch of stuff that like, and I won't share what that was, but just a bunch of stuff from Yvonne. And Issa didn't see that. So all the stuff you see on Issa's coverage was that
genuine reaction to
was a genuine reaction to that. And that's something and that was the last thing I shot. I mean, we shot the farther stuff, obviously, but that was the last close-up I needed to get, because Issa was just like, she was just like, I can't stay. She's like, I hate you. But it worked. And so that's what's in the cut.
I wasn't ready for that. That even made me emotional. I mean, we're so in love with this show. Like, do you realize or understand like the impact that y'all have made? I mean, I'm sure you do, but it's
obviously it's not really until this morning. I mean, people love this show, and like, I think this season, you feel certainly the cultural relevance of it in a much different way than I think I felt. And I think it's still surreal to think that like I'm a part of anything that's like that significant in the world and in the culture. It just is, it's like, how do you wrap your head around something like that theoretically, right? Because when I'm making this show and Issa and I are making it, and the writers, we're just like being nerds over in a corner, like, writing stuff we think is funny or interesting or dramatic or whatever, but you're not like, you just are never that high in your own supply to be like, we're changing culture, we're amazing. Like, you don't think that way. You're just trying to make something. I'm just trying to make Issa laugh, she's trying to make me laugh, or the writers trying to make each other laugh, or we're all trying to make stuff better. So we're just, you don't really know, right? Because you're just over in a corner. I don't know what it's like to like watch the show in Chicago. I don't know what it's like to watch the show, being a Black woman in London. I don't know what that means to you. I know what it means to us, but so to watch everybody's response, I think this morning, because the finale had so much pressure, I didn't want to direct it. I was like, there's so many ways this can go wrong more than it can go right. Right.
No,
so I just
didn't
want to touch it. I just didn't want to do it.
No, you did that. I'm glad you did, because it was so well done and so different from the last episode, which is interesting. Like you could tell the distinct difference between something being shot Western style and something. I don't know what. I'm not a director, so I don't know the technical names of the stuff. But this last episode was shot so differently, and we saw more things, and we saw. Even Issa kind of drive by the dunes, and
Yeah.
I think it was a Best Buy.
Yeah,
Um,
it was the Rite Aid,
the
and the
Rite
guy was
Aid.
walking out in a Best Buy shirt.
Yes,
One of
yes,
the
yes,
merchants
yes,
for it.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
this one was more like one thing I kept when as I kept reading it again, you always sort of ask, what's the vibe I'm feeling here? And because I felt we were like moving through time, a lot of my energy was about like fluidity because like
mm,
you're bouncing around through birthdays, you're kind of just in these little scenelets and then you're kind of gone. And so there's not anything that like is linearly linked to the next moment, you know, like Molly's birthday to Issa's birthday. Obviously, you
right.
know, there's some months in between that. So many things happen, right? So you're trying to do a few things. You're trying to answer questions that you know, oh, in the last scene, so much time has passed. So like, where are they now, right? And so for me, a lot of my energy was around constantly kind of keeping the camera moving as much as possible
Mm,
until and letting it stop when there was something that felt worthy of watching. But in other words, we're kind of like snaking through time. That was kind of, even if you look at inner intermittent shots of like the time lapse, everything is so
sure.
fast and moving. And so for me, it was all about movement. Everything is moving. We're just moving through this year. The whole year is like we're moving until there's a moment to stop. And then let's stop and then let's like kind of observe what's happening and then we're moving again. So that was really my approach. If there's times where you're like, the camera's kind of always moving.
Going, yeah.
It's always going and moving in some way, whether it's a pan, a tilt, a dolly, a steady
Right,
cam
right.
shot. It's all kind of like that.
There was such a brilliant foreshadowing though in the writing when in the last episode there was this moment of we have to get together every birthday. We at least have to make an effort to do that. Like so then we were able to follow along even better.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about you though really quick before we have to close. You started on Girlfriends and then did Brooklyn Nine-Nine and now Insecure and you have a movie on Netflix. So what now? Like what are you thinking about the next step? Are you
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I have another movie on Netflix. Hopefully that'll be going soon. I'm attached to direct a movie for Universal. I have my TV deal at Disney through this new division called the Onyx Collective, which is a new studio that's like for creators of color. So it's like myself, Natasha
Mhm.
Rothwell's in a deal over there, Ryan Coogler, Dustin Creighton, who directed Shang-Chi. So it's a lot of us over there as creators of color that are making content for Disney, Hulu, Onyx, FX, ABC, ESPN,
Beautiful.
all these places. So that's sort of where my new TV deal. I started a new comic book company to develop uh, independent comic creators of color, their IP through and either getting that made through the TV deal or getting it
Mhm.
into the movie. So there's like I'm signed on to direct a docu-series that'll be announced soon for
Yes.
Disney. So there's a lot of stuff for
Get the
sure.
bag, get the bag. I love
I'm
it.
definitely not short of work for sure.
Good. That's awesome. I mean, it's I wish y'all would have kept Insecure going, but it's okay. It's listen, we can go back, rewatch the episodes. It's fine. Have y'all thought
Yeah,
about a movie
it's
or
a
a reboot?
good, yeah, no, that's
It's over. It's a wrap.
nah, I mean, Issa's been living with this obviously for like 12 years. I mean, she started Awkward Black Girl and
Sure.
obviously she had for a couple of seasons and that was like 4 years. And then she developed the show for 2 years and then making it for 6 years. So that's 12, when she started, it was 12 years ago. So she was like in her 20s. So she's in her 30s
Mm-hmm.
now. So it's just a long,
It's time to put it to bed for her.
yeah,
She's
it's
like, I'm
like,
done.
she's like, I've been doing this character or the version of this story for a long time. It's time to
Sure.
move on. And so,
I get
and
that.
we all felt that way. We felt like we did the thing we wanted to do, and so proud of it and happy. And I feel like it's good to leave on this note where you're like,
Mm-hmm.
people still want you around. You kind of had a good run. People are like, oh man, this is
Right.
my season, or whatever. And you can enjoy them all and not feel like, that one I could kind of move past. Like,
Right.
like I feel like we kind of leave
On
on
a
in a
high. On a high.
in a good space. Yeah.
Ooh, almost forgot. But since your wife is an attorney, did any of like her personality inform what was written about Molly?
No, I mean Molly is based on a friend of Issa's.
Oh,
So I think, and so I think that character was kind of formed as it was. I mean, my wife was a legal consultant on the show. So there'd be a bunch of stuff that she would do legal wise just to say like, oh, she'd say it like this, or oh, she would kind of present it like
Mm,
this, or
so
if she
dope.
was, yeah, you gotta keep the money in the family. You know what I mean? You
Right.
gotta keep that.
I love that.
Plus, it's
um,
the only space I get to be the boss of my life. At home, I don't get to be the
because at
boss of that.
home, hello somebody.
I
Mama
don't get to
runs
be
the
the boss
show.
of that. Yeah, I don't get to be the boss of nothing.
And so before I forget, you went to USC too. I went there too for grad school, and I
That's what's up.
remember it being like such a great place, so many awesome resources, but there not being a lot of people of color. And I remember
Yeah.
that it kind of impacting the way that I kind of came to class every day and the decisions that I made, etc. Did that affect you in any way? I mean, obviously we're proud to have gone to our alma mater, but how did that impact you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I was in my film program class, there were only two Black people in the whole class, and I think 4 or 5 of us as people of color through my whole year. So of 25 students, only 5 are people of color. So obviously had a huge impact in the way that but also I found out, you don't know what you're going through, but it kind of prepared me in lots of ways to like be in writers' rooms where I'd be
Mm.
the only one, and like you still got to get the stuff done, right? And
Mm.
so that's, you don't know how those things are preparing you for that, but also like it's made me want to be a better bridge. So like I'm talking to USC right now about like a writer program for students of color, to like help them
Yes.
branch out from their senior year into like getting stuff into the marketplace. And so that's a program that I'm developing with USC right now, because I was like, I wish something like that I wish there would have been a better, like, you as a writer transition you out into the world, especially as a writer of color. And the
Hmm.
world's so different now too than it was in, when I graduated in 95. I mean, it's so differently in terms of content, how content gets out. It's just it's night and day. So I think
Right.
there's easier ways to like help that. And so definitely for me to be a bridge for all students of color is
Damn, that makes me
so
proud in
important.
my heart. Thank you so much for doing that because we needed it. Yep.
For sure, for
um,
sure.
so okay, I'm sorry because I know you gotta go and I know you're busy, but I have to ask. You graduated college, then you were a substitute teacher. And at what point did this turn around? Like, at what point was it like, oh, finally, I got the break that I've been waiting for this whole time?
Yeah, and it wasn't like that. Like I graduated, I made like a little indie movie that nothing happened with. I sort
Mm-hmm.
of was writing like animated shorts for the internet. I started working at Disney, at the theme park division as a writer for like 2 years.
Cool.
So I was doing that. I wrote music videos for this director named Tim Story, who was like my mentor in college at USC. And Tim directed like Barbershop and the Ride Along movies and Think Like a Man and Tom and Jerry. So Tim's like a super he directed Queens, the show that's on ABC.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was writing his music videos for a while. And then I was like, look, I need to like really get better at television. And USC didn't have a lot of TV writing classes. So I took classes at UCLA Extension, which was super humbling to like go back to school and be like, I needed to learn. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I ain't too proud. So I had to get over myself and like go back to school for like a
Ooh.
couple of years to like learn how to write television, because I didn't really know how to write TV. And so I had to do that. So doing that, I was like, I'd rather just work like a job that I don't have any emotional investment in, that I know if I had to leave that job tomorrow, I would do it. So, I don't mean that to say I was a bad teacher. I meant that to say that like it wasn't
Screw
my
these kids.
passion.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, yeah, I think it is. But I got to do that. I worked in a nonprofit, but also in that time, like I was a tutor with like foster kids, which made me open my eyes about Black kids in the foster care system, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
open my eyes for some other things I wanted to do in that area, right? I worked at a nonprofit, which helped me when I was talking to Issa. I worked at a nonprofit, but I wouldn't have worked at a nonprofit. Like I had a buddy of mine that worked. He was like, I can get you a job here. It's like 10 hours a week or whatever. I was like, great. It's like 2 hours a day, I in and out. But that experience, I
For
could
we
talk to
got
Issa.
y'all.
Yeah, so we got y'all. I could talk about that, right?
Right.
So I learned so much about just myself, because I wasn't like, it was a time where I was doing a bunch of work, but I didn't see the fruits happening. And it was just a reminder that like, you don't always see your growth, but if you're working hard, there's something
Mm-hmm.
happening. And I just didn't know, because I couldn't tangibly point to anything and go, oh, that's hope, right? I just was like,
Right.
I gotta just get better. And oftentimes you can get super discouraged. And it was discouraging. It was humbling. I was watching friends of mine, and I'm as happy for them, who were
Sure.
getting opportunities. I just wasn't getting them. So I just didn't know, man, is this like actually working? And then I finally wrote, like, I kept writing specs through the TV program, and I gave it to a friend of my wife's who was on Girlfriends, Karen Gist, who's an amazing writer that created Our Kinds of People, and she
Mm-hmm.
was a showrunner of Star, and she was on Girlfriends as a young writer, and she gave it to Mara, and Mara brought Akil, and Mara was like, "Oh, this is like." It was good enough to like get Mara's attention. I don't know if
Right.
it was good if I read it today, but it was good enough for Mara to see something in me, and Mara hired me as like a almost like a trainee,
Ooh.
and so thank God for I constantly that's the go to me. So I constantly thank Mara for whatever she saw in me. Thank God, because I would not be here today without Mara. And then eventually she hired me as a full-time writer, and but that took 9 years. I
Mm-hmm.
gave you like a 2-minute story over 9 years, right? And
So
so
what would you say to yourself to keep going, even in those moments where you couldn't see the silver lining or the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of the tunnel?
yeah, I mean, I had self-sabotaged, I think, myself enough before I went back to school
Mm-hmm.
to know, like, I know where the self-sabotage story goes because I've already
Mm,
been doing it. Like I kind of, you always say like, oh, it had to happen in its time, right? Because I used to be like, oh, if I'd have just done this earlier, if I'd have just been more, whatever, put my ego aside and blah blah. But I don't know if it would have happened that way either, right? Like I had
mm,
to go through so much personal things of not learning how to not self-sabotage myself, right? Which was a bigger problem, right? Like if I had got that opportunity earlier, I could have been continued self-sabotaging myself, right? That wouldn't have helped anybody long term. I had to learn to stop doing what I was like, oh, God was like making me learn other things about myself
mm-hmm.
as a human being that had nothing to do with being a writer. He was just like, Prentice, you got to grow in this area of your life, and we got to work on that. So we just gonna put the writing thing on pause. You're gonna learn, but we're gonna learn this other thing that's more valuable because it will help you once that door opens, right?
Mm,
And but you don't know that in the time. You only know
right.
it after. So what I was saying to myself was like, I don't have a better option. And my wife at the time was like, look, there's no plan B. So we're gonna go all in on this writing thing. She wasn't like, oh, well, if it doesn't work out after a year, you can get a job. Like she was like, no,
Shout out
whatever's
to
going
the wife for holding it down. That's beautiful. Yes, come through support system. I love it.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
beautiful. Okay, so what's one thing that you want Insecure fans to have left with while watching the finale? What's that one if silver lining or message that you want people to sit with as they watch this, if they haven't already done so, which I doubt.
I don't know. I think Issa said something really great in the documentary that we did that was like, I just want people to like want it to be their favorite show and just love this show. And I think that's a very like simple but great thing. Because I just want people to feel like I know like when Martin and old Cosby Show reruns come on, that I
Mm-hmm.
still like remember where I was when I first saw them, or like, oh, I know it's about to happen, or this it still makes me laugh. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like I know Shanae about to say this, and I'm about to start laughing, like just rolling on the floor, because it
Right.
just makes you feel good. It just makes me like,
Yes.
oh, I remember that. You know what I mean? I just want people to, when they think about our show, just to be like, oh man, the Coachella episode. Oh my God, Kelly about to pee herself. It's still funny. You know what I mean? Or like
Right.
this Lawrence Issa moment at 408. Oh, I still get the feels when they say they love each other, right?
Sure.
I just want people to always have those memories uh about this show and feel that way, that 20 years from now
That was
they can
beautiful.
tell their kids like, oh, you gotta watch this show so good. And because I think that's what's so great is like I've shown Martin and Cosby to my kids and they're like, this is so good. You know what I mean? You're like, that's a
Timeless.
definition, that's 40 years. Those shows are like 30,
Right.
40 years ago now. Martin came on in 92, Cosby came on in 83. So you're talking about 40, 30 years of something that still works. That's
Right.
hard. That's
Right.
hard to create something like that that's timeless like that, like songs, like you hear certain songs, you're like, oh man, that song is just like
It still
still
hits no matter
it
what, no
still
matter
hits, you know what I
when. Yeah.
mean? You put on like, some Prince, Let's Go Crazy, like, oh, that song still bangs. Just, so I think that's what I just want.
And I think, the beauty of Insecure that these other shows didn't have, not to downplay them because they're
Yeah.
classics, right? But one thing that's so beautiful that Insecure did have was just like all these spurts of Black culture in Los Angeles that people otherwise would not have seen,
Yeah.
right? Like the
Yeah.
dunes, when y'all went to Doolin's or got catered from Doolin's, or, just it was like, wow, like finally these places are being highlighted, and you
Yeah.
felt it feels good. That feels good too, in a completely different way. Like you feel represented, you feel like people can see
Yeah.
you and see the places that you go to. I don't know. It was just, it's great. So
And that
kudos
was
to this
very,
decision.
that was very, I mean, Issa and I are both from those neighborhoods. We're both
Hmm.
from like View Park, Ladera, um, like Ladera, uh, it's like Lamert Park, Baldwin
Mm,
Hills area. So, you know, having those things represented on our show, and we always were very, you know, me, Issa, and Melina were very like, look, we wanted to do the way that Entourage would show like Beverly Hills and Santa Monica and show all these really cool areas that like
sure.
there's just as much beauty in those areas in our neighborhoods, right? You just don't
Hmm.
see them, you know? So for us, it was like, how do we make Simply Wholesome look amazing? How do we make,
Simply wholesome. That's where we got the patties from. I'm
you
sorry.
know what I mean? So yeah, so you know what I'm saying? Like, how do we make like Lamar Park? How do we make SO1 Books look great on the
Right.
show? Right? So that was always our thing, was how do we do it for us?
Yes, and congratulations because you did it.
Okay.
It was well done. And okay. I'm sorry. I know you're short on time, but so Lawrence, there's one episode, and this is the last question. I swear to baby
Okay.
Jesus.
Okay.
Lawrence and Condola. There's an
Mm.
episode, and I think Melina directed that one where we see a side by side of Lawrence going through his stuff, you know, his own struggles, and Condola going through her struggles as a single mom, kind of, and him still wanting to be involved and the complexities in that.
Oh yeah, that was Ava Burkowski, our DP. That was Ava who
There you
directed.
go.
Yeah.
I just thought that was brilliant because we never see the perspective of the father in those stories. We only kind of
Yeah.
hear the mom, and which is, it's still difficult, right? I mean, moms still
Right.
have it hard where, you know, you're with the baby constantly 24/7. But we also saw Lawrence kind of living his life, but kind of being conflicted because he wanted to be there.
Right.
Um, was that what was the decision to make it look like that? Was that done intentionally for that purpose?
Yeah, I mean that it was in the script that way. So I mean, obviously Ava just took it and made it be even more amazing. But yeah, it was in the script like that. And because we really wanted to show that, like, obviously she's a mom, it's a newborn, so the baby just by primary like has to be breastfed in a certain, or at least
Right.
his baby was. So like Condola can't take the time off that like Lawrence can, you know, come in. We
Be
wanted
out
to talk
here.
about that. That like, yeah, that like,
Right.
but and also like also show for Condola that like these things, because you know, at the end of this finale, she said, you know, you could be involved or not, I'm good, you know. And we wanted to show, okay, well, what is that like when you say I'm good? Uh,
Right.
Hurry, she sort of made these proclamations that he didn't need to be involved. Okay, well, like,
Right.
you
Well,
know,
look, this is what it's like.
but look, this what is it, and also to show that like Lawrence does get the Lawrence does have the thing to pop in, pop out, right?
Right.
So, in not in a good way, right? Just in like that's the reality of it, and so,
Mm-hmm.
but yes, that was all very intentional for
Okay.
sure.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so sorry. I just needed to get that
Okay,
out there because we don't ever see the dad's perspective, and I thought that was really good for us to
thank
see
you
all
so
together.
much.
Thank you so much for an amazing show, an amazing run. Thank you for the art that you've contributed to the world. You're really good at what you do, and
Thank you so much.
yep. Thank you. I will
All
send
right,
you a link
have
as
a
soon as
good New
it's up.
Year.
You too.
Absolutely. Bye bye.
Bye.